Hi everyone, welcome to today's edition of Migrating Enterprise Data. Before I dive into the lab, let's do an extensive explanation of SQL Server on Cloud SQL. SQL Server on Cloud SQL offers an easy alternative to fully building out a virtual machine and installing your database on it. It comes with all the benefit of using a fully managed service compared to your own virtual machine instance. But as always, you have to make some trade-off for easier option. The first notable difference is that the server runs on Linux and not on Windows. Google handles all the networking, backups, and maintenance for you, and it also makes it easy to set up failover servers. The downside of not having a Windows-based server is that not all versions of SQL Server are supported. Also, some of the features that rely on Windows are not supported. Typically, since Microsoft does not support all SQL Server features when running on Linux, thus uncoupling SQL Server from Windows means that some of those features won't work on Linux instance. If you need any of these features, you either have to use a Compute Engine virtual machine or re-engineer your application to use an alternative that does work on a Linux instance. There are some SQL Server features that are not supported by Cloud SQL. Basically, some of these just don't make sense in a Cloud SQL environment, and others are simply because of technical reasons. However, many of these features are not widely used, and you could often use alternatives or references. You can create a Cloud SQL for SQL Server instance in minutes using the console. There is a lot less to configure than when building your own virtual machine instance. Typically, you just need to set up your instance ID and a password and choose the region of your choice. There's other additional options, but these are typically the options that you need to set by default. It is also very easy to create a Cloud SQL machine using the command line interface. And you can use Terraform, which we all know that we can use Terraform to automate the creation of infrastructures. And in this case, we can also use Terraform to automate the creation of Cloud SQL database with a simple template. You can also choose among several SQL Server editions and machine configuration. The choice of a version is largely influenced by your database size. Pricing is significantly different, and it is very essential for you to plan ahead. Otherwise, you may spend more than you need to. A good and important note is licensing is per virtual CPU core, but you are always charged for at least 4 bytes of use. You can configure the machine type according to the required capacity of your choice. Enabling automatic storage increase is a great option to consider because it allows you to start off with smaller disks and you can grow them, or Google will grow them for you automatically as needed. Remember that you pay for what you allocate and not what you use. You can configure your Cloud SQL instance to have either a private or public address, or they can have both. The private IP would make your instance more secure, but you have to configure or authorize clients to connect to that instance through the private IP address using a paired network. Enabling private IP creates a VPC pairing between the Cloud SQL database network and your network. Then, only machines in your paired network can access the database. I have a video on using Terraform to create a network pairing, and I'll link it above. A firewall is also used for detection in case of public IP, and by default, it only allows machines within the same project to have access to the server. However, you can authorize one or more external connections. Just as configuring any firewall rule, you can use CIDR notation to allow IP addresses or ranges. I also have a video on using Terraform to create a network and firewall rule. I'll link it above. CloudSQL provides its own maintenance option and automation. It is very advisable to do backups during a period of low utilization. You can also create a failover cluster by just enabling the high availability option that comes with Cloud SQL database. This service would also automate typical maintenance tasks like patch management as well as backups. Choose a maintenance window when there is low utilization, because if the maintenance require a reboot, the server will be unavailable for a short period of time. You can also manually perform a backup or restore with either using the console or the command line interface. It is also good to note that this is not the same backup as the SQL Server backup. A Cloud SQL backup is a snapshot of the persistent disk with the data. It can only be restarted to another Cloud SQL database. As usual, you can also run standard SQL backup as you would with any other SQL Server database on Cloud SQL, or just a general SQL Server database. You can always run standard SQL Server backups as you would with any other SQL Server database. That's an extensive overview. You can go over it one more time to be sure or to be clear of what we discussed under that section. So as usual, let's dive into our lab. The first thing we want to do is we want to start the lab. So on this lab that we are doing, some of the process would take a whole lot of time, and I'm going to fast forward it so that we can save a whole lot of time. Open in an incognito window, then I'll paste my password here. Paste in my password and wait for it to set it up. So here is my dashboard. So for task 1, we want to create a secure, highly available SQL Server database using Cloud SQL. So the first thing you want to do is you go to the SQL, this is the SQL part, you click on SQL. After clicking on SQL, then you create an instance. So because we want to create an SQL server, so choose the SQL server. And the instance ID, let's use the instance ID they asked us to use in this lab. So I'll use this. So here's my instance ID. And I'm also going to generate my password. So I'm generating password. And because I want to copy this password, so let me show it. So you can save this password in a file or anything. But if you are doing it in an actual environment, you may want to save your password in maybe a keychain or a secret manager. So I'm just going to put my password here, and when I need it, I'll access it here. So yeah, production environment. So I'm going to use US Central 1. Then I'm also going to do multi-zones. So I don't need all these. Then under this show configuration options, so I'm just following the instruction that we are going to use in this lab. You can use a standard machine type, and let's use a 4 vCPU and 12 GB. For the storage, I'm just going to stick with 20 GB and XSD. Then we want to enable automatic storage increase, like I mentioned when I was in the explanation, so that anytime we need more capacity, it can easily increase for us, or we can easily also increase it. So if enabled, whenever you are nearing capacity, storage will be incremental and permanently increased, which is fine. So for our connection, we also want to create a secure connection. So we'll use private IP. And since we are using the private IP, we have to create a network peering. So Cloud SQL can help us to create this network peering easily. So, and you can see. So it says private service access connection required, and I can just set up the connection using this default network. So when I set up the connection, I can enable the APIs that are expected. So let me follow the instruction. So under this, it said use an automatically allocated IP, which is fine. So we'll use an automatically allocated IP, then continue. Then after this, we create our connection. It's creating our connection. It may take a while, but it may take a while. I'll fast forward it and see it at the end. Yeah, so it has created that for us, and here we are. So I'm going to untick this public IP because I don't want the instance to have a public IP. I just want the connection to be from a private IP. Then under the authentication, I don't need to choose anything here. Under the data protection, yeah, so this is also fine. Automate backups. And for the flags or parameters, it's also fine also. And you can leave the other settings as default. Then click on create your instance. So it will take a while for our instance to get created. I'll fast forward it and see at the end. And now our instance has been created. Yes, so let's continue. We can check if we've completed this task, and you can see this task is complete for task 1. So for task 2, we want to perform backups and restore the necessary operations we just want to see on our database. And before we can do that, we have to first download the sample database that we are going to use. So this is the sample database I'm going to use. I'm going to call it using the call command. Then after I download it on my cloud shell, then I can now take it to the cloud storage bucket I'm going to use. So first activate my cloud shell, and here's my cloud shell. So it's provisioning. This has been created, and you can see it is created. It's running for now. So then I run this command on my cloud shell. And this is typically everything. So the next thing I want to do is I can list so that you can see what is there. And this is the file that we just downloaded. This file, AdventureWorks LT 2017, and this is the readme of the cloud shell. So the next thing we can do is the def shell underscore project underscore ID. It's a default environmental variable that is for the GCP project of the account. So this GCP project that is there, no, this one, this Qwiklabs, this, when I run this command, this is what's going to show. It's a default environmental variable. So what we are doing in the second line is that we are telling it that anytime you see this, use this environmental variable. Use this environmental variable to create the name of our bucket, because the name of our bucket has to be unique. And this GCP project ID is also unique. So just using it as a bucket name works. Or when you are building your own bucket, you can name it any name, but just make sure that the name is unique globally. So you may want to like, maybe try it multiple times till you find a globally unique name, or just add zeros or maybe 1, 2, 3 at the back. Yeah. So I run this now, and you can see that this is the project ID. This is also it here. So the next thing I want to do is name my bucket. I want to create a bucket with the GSC to make buckets, and this is the name of the bucket. It's going to use this to be the name of the bucket. So paste this command there, then press authorize this. So you can see it's creating the bucket. And if you want to see the bucket, you can come here from your cloud storage bucket. Cancel this. So this is the name of this is our bucket, and this bucket is empty. It's empty now because we've not put anything on it. So let's copy the file that we downloaded before. Let's copy it to this our bucket. So if you want to do that, you use this gsc2 copy command. So cp means copy, and this is the name of this is the part of the one that we downloaded. And now we are copying it into the name of the bucket that we just created, which is this. So yeah, mm. So copy this command. You have to paste it here and then enter. It's copying the files for us, and you can see that it has copied it. So let's confirm if we've copied it. So let's refresh this and see if we can see that file in our bucket. Uh, I just refresh it now, and you can see the file has been added to our bucket, which is cool. Yeah, so that's all. That's all for this one. So the next thing we want to do is we want to import this file. We want to import it into our database from our bucket. And what you just need to do is come here, go to your Cloud SQL back where we are coming from, and click into this Cloud SQL that we created, this SQL Server. The next thing is to import. So we'll import into that bucket that we created. So I can browse this name, just browse it here, then this is it. Select it. After selecting it, it's a BAK file and the name of our database. So the labs want us to use AdventureWorks for our database. When you're copying this name, make sure you're copying it very well so that don't add white spaces at the front or white spaces at the back. It's going to give you issues when you're typing, when you are trying to refer to this database on the database editor. So then I can import this now. So it may take a while to get imported. I'll fast forward it and see you at the end. Yes, our file has been imported successfully. So the next thing we want to do, keep following the instruction. Next thing we want to do is we want to create a backup and want to create a backup for it. And let's see how we can create a backup. So this will be the description I will use for our backup. Initial adventure backup. Let's just do a backup for it. So when we click on backups, yeah, then you can click create backups. So the description I want for our backup, which is this one, you can click on create, and it's also going to create the backup for us. So it may also take a while, but fast forward it and see at the end. That's been created, and let's see if our backup, if we've actually completed this task. So when you check our progress, let's see. Yeah, so this task is also complete. So let's just follow this instruction here. Click the operation link on the left and see what's happening. So if you want to see what's happening, what process, how it is going, so you can see create, finish, import, this one is successful, and also backup is finished. So you can see all the operations that are carried out on your Cloud SQL instance from the operation menu. So the next task is to connect to the database using its private IP address. So, and don't forget that when we want to connect to the database in the private IP address, we are going to create a new virtual machine instance and we are going to try to access that database from that particular virtual machine over the private IP address. So this is just like an external user trying to access the machine from the private IP address. You can copy the private IP address of your Cloud SQL database. So to do that, on the overview, so from the overview, then you copy this private IP address. So you can save it somewhere, but I'm just trying to save mine. So I can decide to save it or not. I can just maybe duplicate this tab, and anytime I need it, I'll just come back here and copy it from there. So let me duplicate the tab. So when I need it, I can just copy it from here and continue the process from here. So the next thing I want to do is I'll create an Ubuntu Linux virtual machine, like I mentioned, serving as maybe the external client that's trying to access the database. So for my virtual machine, okay, to create my virtual machine, I'll create it for my Cloud Shell. Then I'll run the instruction. So if you are familiar with creating virtual machine, you know that this is the command, gcloud compute instance create. This is the name of the virtual machine we are creating, Cloud SQL client. You can decide to name it anyone. This is the zone I'm specifying. This is the image I'm deciding to use. Then click enter. It's creating our virtual machine. Yes, so our virtual machine is now created. If you want to view the virtual machine that was created, you can go to the complete engine and click on virtual machine, and you see the virtual machine that is created, which is this Cloud SQL client that we just created now. And if you take a look at this internal IP, that's also the internal IP that is there. If you take a look at the external IP, this is the external IP that is there also. So because we want to use this to talk to the database, let's SSH into this particular instance that we created. So I'm SSHing into it. I'm just going to wait for my SSH to get set up. Yeah, so I am in the virtual machine already after I've SSH. So the next thing I want to do is I want to download the Microsoft SQL Server client software that would make me be able to access the SQL Server on my Cloud SQL. So when I click on this, then use this command to download it. Enter here. So that's downloaded everything that I needed. So after doing that, I also need to install the software. So this is the virtual machine. So I also need to install the required software with this command. So it's going to update the operating system that I have to make sure that it's having the latest one. Then after that, I'm going to install the software. So this is the software I'm trying to install, the MS SQL tools and this part. So I'm going to use yes. Then I'm going to pick yes also. Use the arrow key to navigate your yes. So yes. It's downloaded the necessary configuration and it's also installing everything that's required. Yeah, so we've successfully installed it. After doing this, the next thing we want to do is we want to add the client software. We want to add the client software to the path so that we can easily call it from that particular path. And this is what we are using. So we are exporting this. We are calling this echo path, and this is the path what we installed in our bash profile, and we are just setting it as we are setting it normally so that we can use that. So after we are done with this, the next thing is to connect to the SQL database that we have. And to connect to the SQL database, you have to replace the private IP to the private IP of our server, that is our database. So this is where the private IP. So when I come back and run this command, I have to change what is there to this private IP, on our SQL. So if you did not note this before, you can just go back to your SQL and from the overview, you'd see this private IP. So you can copy it here. And okay, this is the Cloud Console. I'm not using the Cloud Console. Since I'm talking to the database, I have to go from the virtual machine that I'm using. So I'm going to replace this with this. After replacing it, then click on enter. So the password that I noted down, the password that I generated when I was creating my SQL server on Cloud SQL, so which I saved here, that is what I'm going to use. So I'll copy it now, then come here, click on this, paste the password, then I click enter. So when you see this one, it shows that I'm now inside my database. So that's just to confirm that the next thing we are going to do is we are going to run this command. So when you are running SQL Server, this is the command that you use. This execute SP database is going to show the database, and you have to also use this go command. So after each command you type, you have to use the go. When I click enter, I'm also going to say go. Then you can see that this is the database. This is the name of my database now, AdventureWorks. This is There are some databases that are just created automatically. Typically, most databases this come with it. So the next thing I'm going to do is I want to query my database to see the top 10 company names. This is the name of the database. This is the name of the data set in the database, and this is the name of the table in database. So I can run this command. And don't forget that after the command, you have to type go. And you can see it has returned the values for us. A bike store, progressive sport, this, and this. That's for that. The next thing I want to do also is I want to change all the company names inside this file or inside the database to Google. So I'd say update, this is the path to what I'm using. And I'd say set company name as Google. So just copy the command. After copying, come here and paste it. So, and as usual, you have to type go. So there are 847 company names and it has changed everything to Google. So if you want to be sure of, if you want to see everything, like I said, so when we say select top 10 company names now, I'm expecting it to show um, Google. Let's see. I want this code, and I have to change. I have to also run the go command. So you can see that it's showing Google in everything because I've changed all the company names to Google. Okay. So and now we know that this is typically not this is typically not what we want. This is typically not what we want. So let's restore the previous backup that we did. You know, when we created it, we created the backup of the original document. So let's restore the previous backup so that we can now run the command and see if we'll get back this information. So to just back up the previous one, you can go to the SQL page. So from navigation SQL, so that's how I got here. So when you are here, you click on backups, and this is the backup. This is the backup that we created the other time. So I can decide to restore this backup. So let me restore the backup, and yeah. So I just have to confirm this one. Yeah, then I can click restore. So it's also going to take a while for it to restore it to be functional. Add fast forward, I see at the end. Yes. So our SQL server has been restored. We've restored the previous backup. And this backup took over like 9 minutes. So if you want also took a lot of time, it's fine. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go back to my SQL and run the previous command and see if I can get the previous data result. So I'm just going to run this same command and see if it can give me this. So just the previous one. Now click on type 2. So and you can see that it has changed the information back to this. That is to show that our backup has been restored to the previous one, which is fine. Yeah, so we can confirm if we've done this, have it done. We can confirm if we've done this, and we've done this. So the next thing to do is to trigger a failover to test eye availability. So let's trigger a failover to test eye availability. So manually fail over to another instance and edit the information. And we'll see that when we go back to the main, we'd also know that the information that we changed when it was on the failover instance will get reflected in the main. So that's what we are trying to try. So to do that, go back to the SQL page, and on the overview page, we'll click failover, and we want it to fail over to this end. So we'll just confirm the name of our database here, then we trigger failover. So it also take a while to fail over. I'll fast forward it and see at the end. Yes, so we've successfully triggered the failover. And the next thing we are going to do is we go back to our database editor and then make a change when it's on the failover. So this is what I'm just going to do. What this command does is that I'm going to set the company name to Google just for one customer ID, just for the first customer ID, and that is I'm using where customer ID is one. And I'm also going to show you what it is when we go back to the main. So from here, you run this command, and then after running this command, make sure you also put in go, and it's saying one way is affected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just going to do select star from this. So let's see. I'm going to say select star from, then I'll just then paste this part here. I can just add where customer ID is one so that I would see the company name that is there now. And it should be Google because we've run a command to change it to Google. Let's see. Then you go so you can see the first one. You can see this is Google. This is the company name here, and it's Google that is here. So and that shows that what we did actually worked. But this is just on the failover instance. This is just on the failover instance. Let's go back to our main instance and see if we can still get this. So go back to your SQL overview page. I'm just going to refresh this so I can go back to the main. So I'm just SQL failover once again. So it should take us back to our. It should take us back to our main instance, and not the failover instance. And when we get there, we would also check if the change that we effected actually reflects here. Our failover back to the main has been completed. And let's go back to our database. And here we are on our database. So let's run the previous command and still see if we are going to get this detail. So from here, then click on go. And you can also see, so it's still the same thing. So that is to show that the failover helps us for high availability. And when it went to the failover, and we made a change when it's on the failover, and when we return back to the main, it also still works as expected. Yeah. So we can check if we've completed this, and now we've completed the tasks that were expected for this lab. So after that, you can now delete your database, and you can also delete your SQL client to the service. So I'm not going to do that. But in case you did not do it, when your time elapses, it's going to get automatically deleted for you. So let me just delete also so I can clean up. So and you can see when you look at my SQL server, I'm unable to delete it. So why I'm unable to delete it is because we um we enabled the deletion protection. So we enable deletion protection so that's going to help us protect us from accidental deletion. So if I want to delete, I have to first edit that particular rule. So when I edit it, um, go to the data protection, then this enable deletion protection, I'm going to untick it. And when I click save here, so after it has done edited my server, then I'll be able to delete the server. Yeah, so it has edited the server now, and you can see now that the delete is now clickable. So I can click on delete. So just use SQL Server, paste it, delete it, and it's going to delete. So an overview of what we've done is that we created a SQL Server database using Cloud SQL, and we enabled high availability and deployed it securely with only one private IP address. We then loaded a sample database into it, and we connected to the sample database, or we connected to the database using the client's machine. So we also performed backups, and we restored operation and also tested the high availability function by triggering a failover on our Cloud SQL instance. So this lab is quite explanatory, and we did a whole lot of things. So you can try the lab multiple times to make sure that you're familiar with it, and make sure you also follow the best practices when you are administering a highly available Cloud SQL for SQL Server database. So see you on the next series. Bye for now.